So thank you. The Senate has been called to order. Hi, everyone. Can senators that are entering the Zoom, please make sure that senator is in your display name. Thank you. So I'd like to start today with a land acknowledgement. And as we all know, since we're all dispersed across the US and the globe, just a singular land acknowledgement can't capture the richness of our distribution. But since ASG is a body under the University of San Diego, I would like to share the land acknowledgement that is used at USD. And I also invite all of you today to consider your own position with where you find yourself today. I want to acknowledge that the land on which we gather is a traditional and unceded territory of the Kumeyaay Nation. I want to pay respect to the citizens of the Kumeyaay Nation, both past and present, and their continuing relationship to their ancestral lands. Thank you. The Clerk of Senate will now take roll.
Okay, well, happy Thursday, everyone. So good to see you all. Okay, to start off with, AJ Armienta.
Here.
Thank you. Alana Del Torre.
Here.
Thank you. Alexa Andrade.
Here.
Angela Tharp.
Here.
Thank you. Benjamin Tebow.
Here.
Thank you. Brooke Powell.
Here.
Thank you. Cecilia Baron.
Here.
Okay. Danielle Benya.
Here.
Thank you. Elena Cruz.
Here.
Ezra Wheeler.
Here.
Okay. Fantasy Bias.
Here.
Thank you. Lauren Fettes.
Here.
Thank you so much. Madeline Wu.
Here.
Okay. Max Donahoe.
Here.
Awesome. Megan Wanmack.
Here.
Okay. Mia Soto.
Here.
Sabrina Mendoza.
Here.
Thank you. Sean Kenny.
Here.
Thomas Riley.
Here.
Tiana Fee.
Here.
And Precious Perlas. Apologies. Precious Perlas. If not, I shall come back around. But, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ari. Moving on to approval of today's agenda. Are there any motions? AJ,
I move to amend today's agenda
to include,
a change in the senator chatting about the resolution for equitable learning.
so you'll be presenting?
Yeah. Second.
There's a motion on the floor having been seconded to amend today's agenda. So AJ will be presenting old business. Is there any further discussion on the amendment? If not, please cast your votes. Thank you. Motion passes. The agenda has been amended. Are there any motions regarding the amended agenda? Lauren?
I move to approve the amended agenda.
Second.
There's a motion on the floor having been seconded to approve the amended agenda. Is there any further discussion? If not, please cast your votes. Thank you. Motion passes. The agenda has been approved. Moving on to approval of last week's minutes. Are there any motions? Madeline?
I move to approve the minutes from April 22nd.
Second.
There's a motion on the floor having been seconded to approve last week's minutes. Is there any further discussion? If not, please cast your votes. Thank you. Motion passes. The minutes have been approved. Moving on to our first line item. President Harris has kindly made time to meet with us today. So President Harris, the floor is yours.
Thank you. May I request that just for the moment, we have the slideshow come down. I know there's a slideshow that I'll be presenting later in just a few minutes. I really appreciate, Maya. Thank you for the invitation to be here today. Maya did share with me some questions that you'd like answered, so I'm happy to do that. I have a hard stop just after 1 o'clock, so I'll try to get through my agenda, my answers as quickly as possible. And I will try to leave at least a little bit of time at the end, so you might ask any questions on any topic that you'd wish. Before I begin, I want to say thank you to this group. You've been through an awful lot in the last year. As a group of students and as student leaders, I too was a senator when I was in college. I know the important role that you play in bringing voice to matters on campus. I want to specifically thank Maya for leading this group, and I want to thank Joey for his fine leadership all this year. He has been terrific to work with, has always been thoughtful about how he represents your voice to the administration, and those are wonderful qualities. So I want to thank both of your leaders and all the rest of you for what you've done. It's been, you couldn't have asked for a more difficult year, and people, as we end the academic year, it is a time when everyone is, we're all have COVID fatigue. People are tired. People want to return to some kind of normal. Hopefully here in San Diego, we'll be close to what might have been normal 2 years ago, but I don't think we'll ever go back to completely that. But I admire you for your leadership and for the way that you've always represented other students. So thank you. Let me begin. I have Maya's agenda in terms of what questions. And so these might be brief, and at the end, if you'd like to go back and have me dig into them a little more deeply, I'd be happy to do so. So first of all, what would a return to school in the fall of 2021 semester look like? We did send out an email to all students, and we have heard back from those who both are happy with it and not happy with it about the requirement for vaccines, with the exceptions for medical and religious reasons, or of course, are still available for all students. So our plan is to return, and literally just in the last half hour, we sent a message out to the university community addressing what we hope the fall will look like and what our plans are. I'll try to go through some of the key elements. One of the key elements is that we are going to ask all employees to be vaccinated as well. They too will have the exemptions that you have as students, but you should be, I think you should rest assured that by the fall, we will have in place, hopefully herd immunity and have a very safe campus with regard to COVID. What I don't know about the fall, and if you'd asked me last year at this time, I would have probably given a similar answer, and that is no one knows the course of the pandemic. If you look at the history of pandemics, and I was just recently listening to a podcast about the 1918 pandemic, it hit in 3 separate waves with different variants. We are in the second wave right now that we're seeing across the country. My hope is, because we are now have vaccines and these will be widely available across our country, that won't happen again. But I was on a phone call this morning with a president of another institution in Nebraska, and they had their biggest outbreak yet. And so we're hoping that we can avoid that in the next week as we're still in school, but also hoping that the fall that we'll have as safe as possible environment. We are going to return to in-person learning in the fall. Joey has expressed to me that there are some students who are concerned about returning to in-person learning. We will have options, not necessarily for classes that you would normally have in person, but always there are options to work with your faculty members to make sure you feel comfortable in the classroom. But our intention is to return students back living on campus, and also more so than we have right now, and also to be in the classroom. CDC guidance has just been issued about what the classroom should look like. Back to the 3 feet apart, it was 6 feet before. So, and we should probably put a little more information out, and I'm not sure what the best way to do this, but we have, for example, and Carmen, you recall what the name of the filters are, but there's a special filter, for example, that should be put on buildings to make them as safe as possible with regard to filtering out possible variants and things like that. So we're putting in place that there will be a requirement that students wear masks in buildings. Just yesterday, I think it was, the CDC said outdoors, if you've been vaccinated, you really don't need to wear a mask. So I'm hoping that we have that type of freedom in the fall. But we will follow very carefully what happens over the summer and be prepared to send you more information. But the intent is to return to what might, I hate to use the word normal, whatever that looks like in the future, but what we had before. So that is our intent, and we will be working hard to make sure that that happens. Why don't I pause there just for a moment and answer any questions? Let's just take 2 or 3 minutes of questions on the return to the fall, and maybe my colleague here, Vice President Vasquez, can answer them better than I can. I see one hand up.
Nancy?
Yeah, there we go, please. Oh.
Thank you. Thank you for those updates. I had a question on how one would go about getting the exemption. Like, would you have to register through the DLDRC, or like if it's religious, like terms, like, just how that process would work? And then 2, if vaccines are free for students, or is there like a condition that you have to have some type of insurance?
No, vaccines will be free for students on campus. We actually have worked with the county, and you may be aware that we had the county testing site on campus during this last year. We're actually going to be converted to a vaccination site, and we will have a testing site on campus. So that would be free. All vaccines are free as mandated by the government. The exemption, I'm not quite sure, Carmen, exactly how people go through with that, but please take it away.
Yeah. Let me answer 2 questions. So President Harris's point about the filters in the systems on our in the building systems on our campus. We're moving from an MV8 to an MV13, which is what's recommended. So all campuses will have that level of filtration. To answer your question about vaccination specifically, in terms of how to proceed with an exemption, between July 1 and July 31st, you'll go online to the portal or to the Student Health Center website, and you submit a waiver request. And that'll be processed, and you'll hear back from the Student Health Center. If you have a unique situation, and you may also proceed with a request for health or other reasons with the DLDRC. But the Student Health Center will have that waiver available for all of you. And I want to encourage you right now, and for you to help us get the word out, we have a vaccine site on our campus. As of tomorrow, today, as of today, Thursday, all of their appointments are open. So anyone on a walk-up basis can have the vaccine administered. And it's right here on our property in the West Campus structure. So that's the actual vaccine site. We also have a COVID testing site. And to your question, Fantasy, they are all free of service. There's no fee for the vaccine or the COVID testing.
One thing I would add to the protocols that we currently have in place, where you need to have temperature checks before you enter the buildings, our intention would be that would not be the case in the fall. You would not have to go through that. We will send out the same or similar questionnaire every day because we'll ask people, will you be on campus? Have you checked yourself, and so forth, but we will not require you to do what you're doing right now. At least that's our hope, unless something new happens with the variants and we're unaware of it. And I always have to say that caveat.
Yeah, and
please go ahead, Carmen.
Yeah, one more piece to Senator Sean Kenny's point. The Student Health Center has sent out a communication to all students, letting them know that we have availability of vaccine at our Student Health Center. You just have to sign up through Calendly. So we have the campus county site on campus, and we have the Student Health Center. So it is available for any student who is interested.
I am very pleased that one positive sign of next fall is what will be taking place in 2 weeks or 2.5 weeks, whenever it is, which is graduation. the university has decided to have in-person graduation. We put together a set of protocols where individual students who are graduating typically, and I know that you haven't been through this yet because you haven't graduated, is that we typically have 2 ceremonies on a Sunday. The morning ceremony typically is the College of Arts and Sciences, and the afternoon ceremony are our School of Business and our engineering students graduate together. This year, because the mandates, we have to still follow how many people can be gathered in a space. We're going to have it, instead of inside the Jenny Craig, we're going to have it outdoors. Those of you who are seniors should register by tomorrow to make sure we know that you want to participate and that you're going to. We wish that we could have what we had on the inside, which is 6. I think we used to have 6 guests per student who is graduating, or we try to accommodate that. Unfortunately, with the numbers, we need to keep that to 2. We are likely, depending on what the response will be, we are likely to go to 3 commencements. So it won't be precisely this school and that school at this ceremony. We're going to try to make it as available as possible to everyone. But I am just thrilled. I didn't realize, I've always enjoyed commencement. I didn't realize how important it was to make sure that students have that closing chapter on their time on campus. So to you seniors, we'll try to make that happen as I've said. We also are going to accommodate the class of 2020 the week before, and we think that could be 2 more ceremonies. I'm not quite sure what I'm doing, whether I'm high-fiving or fist bumping or whatever we're going to do, and we'll all be wearing masks, but we will move forward. So that's a really positive sign for us as a university, and for you seniors, congratulations, and I hope that you'll participate. We'll keep it as safe as we possibly can. The second question is a little bit difficult for me to answer precisely the question itself, which was an update on Professor Thomas Smith. Professor Smith is a member of the law faculty. The issue at hand that brought Professor Smith to your attention was a blog post that he posted. I don't remember exactly the date at this time, please forgive me, but he posted a blog that had some pejorative language about the COVID-19 being associated in Wuhan. He used some language that I felt was inappropriate, and it was offensive to our university community. I think over 1,200 students, including law and undergraduates, signed a petition, and we're very upset about this. I too was offended by what he put on his blog. Let me be clear. We stand 100% behind any individual in their constitutional right to freedom of speech. There is no question about that, and is a guiding principle of the university. Professor Smith's right to be able to say what he wants to say on his own private blog is constitutionally supported, and we support that right, obviously. The question at hand was whether or not, because he has an association with the university, with that blog post, did the blog post itself constitute a university statement? There were some individuals who suggested that it was tied directly to the university, and that he had a hyperlink or something that went back. I'm not aware of any of that evidence, and so his blog should be treated like any one of your blogs or posts on Facebook. You're free to say what you want to say, no matter how much we might be offended by it. So we decided as an institution that we would do a review, because we had complaints about it. We did a review, and we hired an outside firm to do that review, so that we made sure that it was completely objective, right? Is this a matter of freedom of speech by Professor Smith? I have not seen that review yet. That review should be in hopefully by the beginning of next week, and we can then put out a statement with regard to the blog post, which was one of the 2 areas that have been brought to my attention. The law firm that we use, it just so happens to be, it's not that we requested it, but it did happen to be that we have a national leader who is who's doing the review, who is of Asian American descent. And so we also have an individual who would understand how some people might feel about this issue. Now, that individual was not selected for that, but it just so happens that that individual is leading this review. So we will have information by next week. There is a second set of questions that have come up through this, and that is that since this post, there have been some students who have brought forth complaints. They feel that perhaps they would not like to be in Professor Smith's class or be required to do so, or they might be, they've said that they've had personal experiences. That's a whole separate matter. And there is a personnel policy about when, if any of you were to suggest, and some of you have had me in class, if you were feeling uncomfortable with my class, there is a policy and procedures that we would follow. That too will be followed. I know this is frustrating. I was offended by what I read. I understand how you would be. And I admire the fact that you did take action and that you're requesting that we take action as an institution. But we are bound by Constitution and also by our own policy time to kind of work through to make sure that we're on top of it. So that's what I can share with you at this moment. Then we're starting to get into personnel issues, and I really just can't talk about it in any more detail. I'll pause there for any questions that you might have at this point with regard to that topic. Okay, thank you. I don't see any questions. And Maya, please help me if I don't see somebody. So let me move on to, I love the question with regard, oh, I'm sorry, is there a hand?
Madeline has her hand raised.
Please.
Thank you for responding to that. I just had like a further question. So based on what comes out of the review, how will USD move forward with that outcome?
I'm not quite sure what the outcome will be because I haven't seen the report yet. So I can't be explicit with you on what happens with regard to Professor Smith. So I have to wait until we have that information. I do know that there was a second set of, or not second set, but a number of questions about what is the law school's commitment to diversity, inclusion, and access? What will they do to try to diversify the faculty? Dean Shapiro did come out with a statement after I announced the Horizon Project. They will be seeking 2 new lines, which they will be funding and hiring over the next year. And he is hopeful that he will have a diverse pool and will make sure we have a diverse pool for those faculty lines. And secondly, he has created a senior position in the law school, specifically very similar to what we're doing with the national search on our vice provost for diversity, equity, and inclusion in the School of Law specifically. So I think those are 2 action items I know that the dean will be taking based on the response from students about how they feel that the School of Law should be more diverse. And he agrees. He is a wonderful advocate for these issues. I see another hand, but I can't tell who's up.
Justin, go ahead.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Dr. Harris, for shedding light on the situation. Just to follow up to Madeline's question, you might have already answered this and I missed it, but I'm just wondering, will the results of the review from the independent law firm be revealed to the USD community, or does that stay confidential?
The results, meaning, do you mean the report itself?
Or the report itself and...
yeah, the report itself, I haven't even thought about. I don't know that we put that out publicly. I don't even know what the form it will take. I don't know if they'll get, I don't know. So I don't have a clear answer for you, but whatever they recommend to us, and if we agree with that, obviously we will put that information out. Whether we're going to release their full report, I don't even know what that looks like. So I don't know yet. Let me think about that. And that's a good question, but I don't really have an answer right now, Justin. I'm sorry.
No, no worries. Thank you, Dr. Harris.
Sarah?
I was wondering if that review and report explicitly also investigated this professor's very homophobic and transphobic comments that he had made on this blog as well, that had been previously brought up by USD Pride Law when this originally were posted.
My understanding is that the firms, what we requested them to do was not look only at this single case with regard to his reference to the COVID-19 originating in Wuhan and out of the lab and so forth, but rather overall the posts that he has made. Again, we get back to constitutional law. Regardless of how offensive his posts may be, if he has the constitutional, he does have the constitutional right to say on his own personal blog, which is what he says it is. This is the question. Is it his blog or is it a blog associated with the university? And this is that's we're waiting to see. I think if we could, we can move on to the next part, because I want to leave open some questions at the end as well. And I'll go through this very quickly with you, but I'm delighted and excited about where we stand as a university and where we're heading forward with regard to the Horizon Project. This is an announcement that I made last week or the week before. They're all starting to blur together these weeks. But this work has come out of really originated with our strategic plan envisioning 2024, and we have very specific goals within our strategic plan to become a more diverse, inclusive, and welcoming environment at the University of San Diego. However, in light of what has happened and in the past year of how we have all become more aware of the social injustices, particularly around race in our country, and particularly with individuals from our BIPOC populations, we felt that, and I did receive emails and requests that the university from a whole series of student groups, also from faculty. And so in the fall, we put together the anti-racism task force at this university. And it was led by 2 faculty members and by a faculty member and by our acting vice provost for his title is diversity, equity, and inclusion. Currently, it's just different than the one that we're going to be hiring. So we received those recommendations. For the last 3 board meetings, I have been speaking with our board about the importance of these issues on our campus and how we can do better. I would say that in my own heart, I have even been recognized for my work in civil rights and very proud of my record. I've, in my own heart, had to think about how I could do better and do more as a leader of this institution. So part of this Horizon Project comes out of the voice of the students, comes out of the voice of the faculty and the staff, and also from the Anti-Racism Task Force. But I have to be honest that it also is my own personal values and beliefs and stand behind this. And I'm actually at a point of great excitement of where we could go. So if someone could advance the next 2 slides, the next one just says the Horizon Project. We selected the idea or name of Horizon in that while we all look to the horizon for inspiration, we also know that you can never achieve the horizon, that will be constantly changing over the decades. I start with one of my favorite, most influential authors that I've ever read and continue to reread is Dr. Howard Thurman. If you don't know of Dr. Howard Thurman, he was Martin Luther King's mentor. He was a good friend of his father. And Dr. Thurman, if you want to look him up, is just remarkable. I know that AJ and some others who've been in my class, I require you to read a little bit about Howard Thurman. But he said, a dream is the bearer of a new possibility, the enlarged horizon, and the great hope. And I think I hope that you believe that there is hope for the future for us as an institution with regard to this. Let's move to the next slides. I wanted to talk about, so where do we stand right now as an institution? And this information, I believe, is from 2021, so it's the most recent information. There is an organization called College Factual, and they have an index for diversity. It includes how diverse your student body is, how diverse your faculty are, and how do you compare to other institutions. So we rank in the nation among 3,514 public and private institutions. We rank 112. In terms of our diversity, according to this particular ranking. You can see some of the institutions. We've listed a few that give you some idea of how we compare to particularly Catholic institutions, but then you also see some Ivy schools, Stanford, USC, and where they rank. Our hope and our goal with the Horizon Project is to be in the top 100 in the country. and to do that in the next 3 to 5 years. Let's move to the next slide, please. U.S. News and World Report also has a scale, but they don't rank schools from 1 to 4,000. Rather, they look at it on a scale of 0 to 1. And the closer you are to 1, the more diverse the institution. You have some sense here by looking at the 3 schools that are listed. So Villanova and the University of San Francisco are very similar institutions, Catholic, and they're just put up there as reference points. But you can see that we are on the positive side or closer to 1 than to 0 with regard to U.S. News and World Report. Let's move to the next slide. There are other rankings and ways to look at this. So when you start looking at all 4-year schools, so that 4,000 number includes all college and university, including community colleges. Now, if you just look at 4-year institutions, we rank 249th out of 2,000. You see these rankings. We don't have a specific goal right now, but I would think that we would want to be in the top 10% in all of these moving forward. The last one will be the most difficult because we have a ways to go because it's a much smaller population, but I think we can get there. May we move to the next slide, please? So a couple of years ago, we looked at compare ourselves on a number of fronts, not just with regard to diversity and inclusion, but rather, how do we compare? And I'll show you this slide in just a moment. Let's move to the next one. What we decided to do is pick 15 institutions, and we thought the best way to compare ourselves with Catholic schools, if we're trying to stay within that realm, is to look at how do they do with regard to the overall student retention rate. These are criteria that are used by U.S. News and World Report to rank institutions as well. And then how do we compare with regard to 6-year graduation rates? And Maya, I am happy to, by the way, this slideshow is certainly available to anybody who wants to look at it more carefully. So this is not something that you won't see again. And I'm open to feedback. So you get a sense of who those 15 schools are. Let's move to the next slide. This one is going to be difficult to read, but we created this one a number of years ago for the Envisioning 2024 strategic plan. Our number one goal is student learning and success. Our students need to be successful in order to, before they graduate, we will make sure they're prepared for success. The number 2 goal is strengthening diversity and inclusion. And this was approved by the board in, Carmen, I think it was 2016. So this plan is almost 5 years old. We wanted to improve operational efficiency. We wanted to talk about how we have a better or stronger or continue to have a strong employee base. And then we wanted to talk about our local and global reputation. If you look under goal 2, if you can see this, how do we compare to those 15 schools? So we're number 1 in terms of Hispanic percentage of our undergraduate student population. You see that we're in the lower half with regard to the percentage of our student population that identify as Black. And then overall in the diversity index, which is that first diversity index that you saw that I put up, we're in the top 3. Our goal obviously here would be to move up in all these categories and to be at the top among our Catholic peers. Let's move on, please, to the next slide. So let's get into some of the details. What do our first year retention rates look like? You can see here, I've put the 3 largest identified populations of students on our campus that are non-white. We certainly have Indigenous students. Those numbers are very small. We want to try to improve those. So the percentages would not make a great deal of sense in this context. But what I would ask you to do is to compare. So people have asked me, why does the Horizon Project have such emphasis on our Black students? If you notice in virtually all the years, and that our Black students have been retained at a lower rate than the rest of our student population. The good news, if there is such, if you want to see good news in this, is that our retention of Black students is almost double that of the national average. So that's among all institutions, but we want to be among the very best of the best. Let's move to the next slide, please. Here is what I think is the most important, and that is how do we compare with regard to our 6-year graduation rates? Again, when you start to look at the numbers, and this is the 6-year graduation rate. While most of our students graduate in 4 years, this is a federal, this is how the federal government, they ask us to provide data every year. And so when we provide that data, we fall within their categories and the way that they've determined how we should report data. And they use a 6-year graduation rate because they know that most students don't graduate in 4, but most of our students do. So anyway, you look at how we compare our students on campus. So the overall population of students, which would include all of these individual groups, but then you see how we do with regard to Asian, Black, and Hispanic students specifically. Let's move on, please. And then, so what's happened in the last, I've been here 5 years, so I was just curious, what has happened since we put the plan in place in 2016? And so I wanted to give you a sense of where we are. So with regard, and you see the word minority, that is a federal government definition. That's not my definition. I typically wouldn't use the word minority, but that's how they would describe basically what we would describe as BIPOC and Asian, Black, Hispanic, Indigenous, and our populations that we would identify as Pacific Islanders and so forth. But so that's where that word came from. So if you look at our instructional faculty, which has been one of the big issues, is that we want to make sure that we have more faculty who represent our students. You see here that on the faculty side, that in every category of Asian, Black, and Hispanic, we've increased over the last 5 years our faculty. One of the things that's important to know is that faculty openings don't occur that often. You know, our faculty, typically we're blessed to have them here for 30, 40. We even had some who've been here 50 years. And so when those lines open, then we have the opportunity. So it's not as if we start from scratch and we can just build our own faculty base. But you can see that we have made progress in the last few years. Look at our undergraduate student population. And you see that we, with regard to Asian, have remained flat at undergraduate from 2015 to 2020. Our Black student population actually has dropped off, and our Hispanic population has increased. In the graduate student population, I believe, in every population, we have grown. You may see that in that undergraduate population that there's a bit of a discrepancy between the minority population and then when you see two populations go down. What we're seeing, and we believe to be happening, although we're going to do more of an analysis, is that we're seeing more students who typically would have identified as Asian, Black, or Hispanic, or Indigenous, now listing themselves as multi-race, which is another category. And so we don't have enough data on that category to understand exactly what that means, but we're going to dig into that a little bit deeper. May we go to the next slide, please? So our goals. There's so much information and data and research on the success of Hispanic serving institutions in serving BIPOC populations. And we're now identified as an emerging Hispanic institution. What that means is that a school that has over 20% of its student population in the undergraduate population, not the graduate, we actually have a higher percentage in graduate, but the undergraduate population is above 20%, you are an emerging Hispanic institution. That population needs to be at 25% or greater to be a Hispanic serving institution. Last year, I believe we were at 21% of our students identified as Hispanic. Again, Hispanic is the federal definition. We often use Latinx on our campus to describe this population. We also, as I mentioned earlier, want to be one of the 100 most diverse independent universities. And then we get into the very specific data with regard to Catholic peer universities. Since we already are pretty competitive with the overall percentage of our students of color enrolled, we do know that we could do better with our Black student enrollment. And we also want to do better with our student of color retention and graduation rates so that they're the same as the general population. And then we put this very specific goal. One college in particular has done better than the others, and that's the College of Arts and Sciences with regard to recruiting full-time Black faculty. But what we want to make sure through the Horizon Project is that each of the deans have more resources available to them so that they can, there are practices, best practices out there, for example, something called a cluster hire, where you might want to attract 3 or 4 faculty together in a particular discipline or in one of the schools and try to hire a more diverse group in the way you publicize it, the way you advertise and go after and try to attract these individuals. Maybe move to the next slide, please. So this caught my attention last year. This is an activist and founder of the South Seattle Emerald, Marcus Green. And this is one of your fellow students who I want to identify, but really brought this to my attention. I think it's a great quote, because we talk about we want to be a welcoming campus. However, he brings up a very good point. There's a significant difference between you're welcome to the culture that we already have created to this was created with you in mind. And so while we can't start from scratch and rebuild the institution, I think this is the mindset we should be having going forward. We should be creating an environment with you in mind, meaning everyone. And this also includes, obviously, our LGBTQ plus community, any of our marginalized or individuals that are underrepresented on our campus. We have to rethink and create an environment with everyone in mind. May we move to the next topic or the next slide? So one way to think about this is the 3 Ps. So it's about people, it's about policies, and it's about practices. And I'm running way too late on this, so let me go through them very quickly, and you can access the website for this. We want to recruit more diverse student body, a more diverse faculty, and a more diverse administration and staff. I'm very happy to report that we are in the final stages. And while we can never, ever replace Vice President Vasquez, she is a remarkable leader, a wonderful peer, and a good friend, and we will miss her terribly. I have this is that we're in the finals. I want to thank Joey for serving on that search committee, and he spent his last weekend doing this work. But we are down to a small number of individuals, and it's a very diverse pool. And please check with Joey about, I'm very excited about the candidate pool that we have. And I think that we'll be able to bring to you some pretty exciting candidates in the next couple of weeks. We are in the final stages also, and that should be in the next week or so. We will be naming a new vice provost for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it really is a statement to the university of how well we're recognized and that the quality of the individuals who have applied. Let's move to the next one. I'll finish up. Policies. The policies range from our test blind admission policy. So for example, we believe that this was an important piece. Nationally, a number of schools decided to not include tests as part of their admission policy because it was people didn't have access to take the test and so forth. I think this is something that we may not want in the future because our freshman class or our first year class, and of course, deposits aren't due till May 1st. So we don't know what the class exactly will look like until deposits are in. But I can tell you right now, the applicant pool and the accepted pool. So let's just go to the people who were accepted. 20% increase in Hispanic students, a 20% increase in students who identify as Black. So we think that had an impact on us to be able to diversify the class. We're going to mandate campus-wide anti-racism. And this is a topic I would like to work with the future leaders of this group on. And someone has brought to my attention, you know, Dr. Harris, it's great to have anti-racism training, but if they have to do it online, will they really pay attention? Are they going to follow through on what we ask and so forth? And so I will be back to you. We need to discuss how we make sure that people are taking that training. They're going to be required to do so, but you know, what would be the impact if they didn't, and how would we follow up on that? Number 3 is an important one because on our campus and during your time here, unfortunately, there have been a couple cases that have been, for lack of a better term, not only unacceptable, but horrendous in terms of how someone has acted towards a member of our community. One of them was identified as a potential hate crime, and hate crime has a federal definition. Otherwise, if someone does something completely inappropriate, we put it within the acts of intolerance definition. That could range from someone just simply being ignorant, not knowing that they're using the inappropriate language or that they don't have exposure to individuals who come from different backgrounds and experiences and beliefs and so forth. And it could range to someone who maliciously acts, but it falls below the federal guideline of the hate crimes. So the Anti-Racism Task Force said we should have a new category that's kind of that middle category that doesn't rise to a hate crime. So we're going to be working through that as well. I think that's an excellent suggestion. So let's move to the last piece. I'm sorry, I'm running late. Practices. The number one thing, and you've asked, well, so how are we going to know to support our Hispanic students? What are we going to do here? We're asking every academic unit and every administrative unit, I would recommend for your body to do the same. And that everyone needs to create a diversity plan and an implementation schedule. You'll see the possible categories that our faculty and our administrators will be looking at, but I think this is a great practice. While there are many of our units who have already done that, and the university has a plan, I think we need to have it from each individual unit and hold them accountable. Let's go to the practices, and then I'll try to open it up, Maya, for a few minutes. Please go to the next stage. And so we're going to review our public safety protocols, and particularly best practices for working with diverse populations. And many of you, or a few of you on this call, have worked with our chief of campus safety, and they've been very helpful in making sure. And then we want to make sure that we do other things that are maybe more fun, the hospitality practices. The number 4 is, just so you know, procurement practices is who does the university buy products from? And are we making sure that those businesses are diverse businesses? I can say this, that the board is very serious about it. We have the most diverse board in our history. They still believe they're not diverse enough, and I would agree with that. But you need to know that they've made serious strides as well. But they're also looking at what's considered ESG, which is basically around environmental and social justice issues, that when we're making investments, for example, as a university, are we taking into consideration whether those individual corporations have the same belief systems as we do? It's a very complicated issue, but it's a great place, I think, for us to start. Maya, I apologize. You know how long-winded I am. I've gone so far, but I really am excited. I just want to end with this, that no matter how far a person can go, the horizon is still way beyond you. We're always going to be striving to be better. And I will look forward to working with next year's leaders to help us implement this. I think maybe I should just open it up, Maya. I've got about 5 more minutes to answer any questions, and it doesn't have to be on the Horizon project, but if you'd like to ask other questions, please do.
AJ?
Hi, President Harris. Thanks for coming. The academics committee had a quick question regarding pass-fail. Last evening, members of the ASG community met with University Senate's executive community, as well as we've invited Provost Baker to an ASG Senate meeting. We've put together a pass-fail resolution, and we wanted to know what your thoughts are on undergraduate students' continued efforts for a pass-fail despite administrative and faculty senate's lack of support.
Well, my belief is that you should pursue it, and that you should be advocates for the people you represent, which are the students on this campus. And if your constituents believe that this is important, then you should pursue it. And I would support that. I personally was in favor of a pass-fail, but you need to know that while I might have a great title and you think I know everything and that I have almighty power, I do not. And so the decision about whether whether faculty will provide a pass-fail for all students lies within the faculty. They have the authority to make that decision. So I would encourage you to pass the resolution, to move forward, and to meet with Provost Baker, and also the representatives who participate in the University Senate should bring this to the University Senate.
Sabrina?
Hi, President Harris. As a first-gen lower-income Latinx student and transfer student, I had a question about the Envisioning 2024 as to why the target percentages for transfer students is at 25% when that has been met consistently, if not above it, since 2016, the academic year. So I'm just a little confused about that. I know that you guys have created a scholarship for transfer students, so finally, I'm glad we have that resource. I also am aware that you guys are intending to become a Hispanic serving institution. I want to know, how are you going to outreach better to Hispanic serving institutions such as community colleges? Because honestly, you don't have a presence there. And getting to USD is really hard. I know you updated your transfer articulation, but I really think that you guys need to create a physical presence.
I think you're right. The second half of your question is, I can try to address it quickly. One, we're well aware that we do not have enough efforts to have a pipeline. So if I had a 4th P, it would be pipeline. people, practices, and policies. And the pipeline really starts in high school, even before that. So the Horizon Project will have elements in it to start to develop summer programs for students. We'll be working with the public high schools locally in particular. You may be familiar that, what was it? 3 years ago, we started something that we called the Torero Promise to Catholic high schools. And what's interesting about Catholic high schools in San Diego County is that they're 56% diverse. So they're more diverse than I even thought. And we were having a much better percentage of those students come. And that was to articulate clearly, how do you go from even the Catholic high schools? They didn't know how to get to USD. Constance Carroll, who is the chancellor, is retiring from the San Diego Community College system, and I, and the 3 presidents of the Mesa College, of City College, and so forth, we met in December, and we're putting together very specific programs for how a student, we're thinking about how a student might come, say, out of Kearney High School. Right now, Kearney and Mesa have a 2+2 program. We're thinking it should be a 2+2+2. So as we think about what President Biden is proposing for free community college, that would lower the overall cost for a 4-year degree for community college students. So could we possibly have a pipeline where they started a community college? Grossmont is included, by the way. So when they have a community college degree and they come to here, is there a way that we could even include them? Maybe they could come to athletic events, or because many times they don't have that kind of spirit on their campus. How could we include them in summer orientation? I'm working with a philanthropist right now who's interested particularly with regard to City College and how he might support that. Mesa College president, I'm talking to Pam Luster. So I think we're going to have a great pipeline to do this. But you've identified clearly, we need to do more with public high schools. We need to have the pipeline developed. We need to make it easier for community come to the University of San Diego, and we're going to make that happen. So thank you. And then I'm sorry, I've got a hard stop in about 3 minutes. So may I answer any other questions?
Sabrina, do you have a follow-up question?
Yes, it's about a different topic. President Harris, I was wondering if you were aware that currently listed on the USD website, there are only 4 single occupancy lactation spaces. First of all, how is that enough to support our Torero community? And secondly, how come supporting the lactating community is not included explicitly in the Horizon Project nor the Envisioning 2024, which lactating in general states is something that has systemically been oppressed for lactating folks. So I'm just curious why that isn't directly included.
Right. Well, this is why we had this conversation. It didn't dawn on me, and no one else brought it up. So it's an important topic. I didn't know we only had 4 stations on campus, so that's something we have to look into. That will be on my, that'll be another thing I need to do. So thank you.
Fantasy?
All right.
Thank you. Just quickly, I know you're about to leave, but I like the presentation. I appreciate the efforts that are happening. I would just, I guess, encourage, I know the word diversity was used a lot, which I guess, can encompass a lot, but just the intersectionality of the faculty, the students, it kind of just goes beyond, the racial diversity that I think was explicitly stated. So like you were saying, like LGBTQ students, disabled students, low income students, transfer students, it just involves a lot more people than the different races. And especially when it comes to faculty, their representation is super important. So if students, can be more involved in the work that's going to be done, even like the training or whatever it is, I know that student leaders here be more than happy to kind of have that intergenerational collaborative as we work towards all of these efforts.
I think you're spot on. Intersectionality is precisely what we should be looking at. And it's so much more complex than just having more of X students, whatever student population you're looking for. It is about all these different ways of looking at our campus community. One step forward, and I know this is a very busy time for all of you, and I know that in the next 2 weeks you'll be preparing for exams and graduation and so forth. But we will be coming to the campus with probably 2 or 3 finalists that will be open forums with regard to the Vice President for Student Affairs. I need you to participate. I need to hear your feedback. I know that Joey will take a leadership role with this, but we need to hear from you. So as we move forward, there's another element of this, which is who we're putting in the senior leadership positions at this university. I think it's very important that I don't know how we could hire someone in a senior leadership position at this institution going forward who's not committed to this work. And you're right. It's someone mentioned earlier being low income. Having been in that position and a first generational student myself, I'm very empathetic. But we didn't call those individuals out specifically in the plan, and so there's an assumption that they're there. But I think we have to do better. So I'm excited. I think this is the kind of work that I want to do. And for those of you who are undergraduates who will be returning next year, I want to work with you. I want to have more opportunities. And, I just want to be in person with you as well. I'm just so tired of Zoom meetings. So thank you for taking the time today. You've been terrific. And please send any more information or questions that you have my way. You can do it through the formal channels, through Maya or Joey. But if you also just want to reach out directly to student affairs staff or to me, you know that I'm available. So I wish you the very best as we finish this semester, finish strong, and God bless you all. So thank you for the time today.
Thank you so much, President Harris. If anyone has any other questions for President Harris, feel free to send them to me and I can share that.
Maya, may I just, in closing, share with you that I am really grateful to all of you in our Associated Student Government Senate and the leadership, the executive board, for your compassion, your generosity, and your leadership. We were able to support the very unique and special needs of our most neediest students this year and last spring because of the generosity of ASG. And without that, that would not have been possible. You continue to be the voice of students and bring forward the issues and the sensitive matters that we need to be hearing and challenged on. And I want to encourage you to continue to do that. I have had 16 years of incredible experience with ASG leadership, and it has been the best part of my with students, more so in person than in Zoom. For those of you who know me, I am a hugger and I am a people person. So I really miss being with all of you, but I want you to know I send you my love and my best now and for the future. And I'm really glad that I had a chance this year to work, particularly with Joey and others, on some pretty sensitive matters, because you're wise beyond your years, and please give voice to your thoughts and actions and beliefs. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so moving on to our next, we have a lot on the agenda still. Moving on to our next line item under new business is a presentation of the judicial branch bylaws. So Anaya, the floor is yours.
Yep. I'm gonna share my screen. So thank you. Thanks, Amber. So to preface this document, I hope you've all had a chance to look at it. I understand you only had like 2 days and it's 25 pages, so I get it. So I'm gonna walk you through all of it. But yeah, I'm just gonna get started. It's gonna take me a little while, but feel free to raise your hand if you have questions in the middle and I'll pause. As another part of my preface, the first few pages of this, I'm gonna kind of zoom through because it's in the Constitution. So it's important for you to know what the judicial branch is and the intricacies of it, but it's not necessarily needed to go in detail. Is this zoomed in enough, or should I zoom in a little more? Someone can just come off mute. Good?
All good.
Thank you. All right, so Article 1 and 2 are pretty basic. It's just our name and our purpose, which is to just be a competent judicial body that follows the ASG Constitution, bylaws, Robert's Rules of Order, and all that stuff. As far as membership, it's basically just saying that we're a group of 5 justices, 1 chief justice, a parliamentarian, and 3 other associate justices. This is a standard qualification across ASG that you can't be in 2 branches at once, save for if you're like me, Maya, or Lupe, where your position necessitates you being in 2 branches. Basic appointment process is just taken from the Constitution, so I won't go too deep into this. Jurisdiction, this one, it's named a little differently in the Constitution, but it's basically saying that we oversee implementation of the Constitution, ASG Constitution, bylaws, elections, parking appeals, all that, student organization discipline board, all those details. And then this is just a very long list of job descriptions, which you saw last week in the Constitution. Accountability is something that's not in the Constitution, but it's basically just saying that for intra-branch accountability, the Chief Justice holds all the other justices accountable, and then I am mainly held accountable by the parliamentarian, though of course inter-branch and of course intra-branch wise as well. There's the performance review bylaws as another route of accountability. This is just basic attendance rules, which is basically identical to your Senate ones, so I won't go too deep into that. Vacancy procedures are basically, there are a lot of words here, but it's basically saying that you go back to the selection committee if there's a seat missing, just reverts back to how you would normally select a justice during the end of the spring semester. And this is just basic resignation procedures telling you who to turn your resignation letter into if you decide to quit mid-year. General procedures are again taken from the Constitution in our quorum of being 3 justices. As far as voting, we generally have a simple majority vote. I don't believe there's anything in this document off the top of my head that's 2/3, but it's simple majority unless otherwise stated. And this is just a standard for roll call vote, which we took from Robert's Rules of Order, so nothing special. The more detailed stuff we're getting into is the session types, which is basically just 3 types of meetings that we would have, though I use meetings loosely because that's kind of equivocating. So the first session type is a closed session where we discuss confidential stuff like FERPA. Second, our meetings, so like your committee meetings and whatnot, those are closed, but people can be invited to them. And then open sessions are the hearings not related to FERPA violations, which would be confidential, but the open sessions are just open everyone, the public, the media, members of ASG, all that stuff. And this will say this later, but while I'm on it, all sessions are considered open unless we find that there's a FERPA violation. So that's like open is its natural state. These next few things are really, they're all really repetitive, but because the judicial branch has, we have wear different hats in terms of performance review, elections, parking appeals, student organization discipline. This is just saying that instead of combining all of those bylaws into this one, making this like a 50-page document, just say, look at the other documents. In short, it's basically all it says. For hearing procedures, this is for hearings that are outside of those realms that I mentioned earlier. So outside of parking, performance review, elections, student organization discipline, basically meaning anything specifically relating to the Constitution and bylaws that's not like a major violation that would cause someone to be censured or something. That's basically, this is saying that's what the rest of this document is about or pertaining to. So this really long list of student rights is basically just saying that people have the right to like a timely notice of their hearing. They have the right to appear and argue on their own behalf. They have the right to know all witnesses that may come before them. They have the right to call their own witnesses. They have the right to all evidence. They have the right to the decision and the rationale. They have the right to appeal. And then this one's really important in that we don't use the term guilty or innocent. I'll expand on that in a second, but this is basically just saying like guilty or innocent until proven guilty. And that you're always presumed to be not responsible for something. And the responsibility is to prove that you are responsible for something. And then also another really important point is that we don't operate on a without a shadow of a doubt type thing. We operate on probabilities. So this is really common for, I think, all hearing boards at USD, that we say what probably happened. We're not a real court. We're not practicing law here, just student government. So we don't need to be that serious about without a shadow of a doubt. So that's a theme that you'll find throughout the rest of the document. So I thought I'd emphasize that here. And then this last point is about if we think someone lied or perjured, even though perjury again is a litigious term, so take that loosely. but we can refer someone to the Office of Ethical Development if we think that something was up. These next sections are really just procedural stuff about filing a petition. So a petition is basically like you formally notifying the judicial branch that you would like a hearing in some capacity. This is just saying what they have to fill out, really basic, just background stuff. And this is saying that they can withdraw their petition at any time. As far as processing the petition, which the petitions fall under two categories. One, asking for like a hearing where someone is responsible for something like, innocent, guilty type thing. The second is just like clarification or interpretation of bylaws in a more formal setting. If you like, I think something should be read one way, you think it's another. That's not really like a I did something wrong type situation. So there are two categories. And in the category of charges and whatnot, those petitions will be read by the Chief Justice and the ASG advisor, and a decision will be made as far as, is this within our realm? Let's go down. Three categories. Is it within our jurisdiction? If the person is found responsible for the actions alleged, is that actually a violation? And would their proposed remedy be adequate or within line? So that's kind of my or the Chief Justice's responsibility in determining that in looking at the petition. However, if petition is denied for some reason, if I deem that one of those three standards or qualifications weren't met, I would still have to bring every decision I make to the judicial branch generally, and then they can decide, so they can overrule me. So it's not like I'm a dictator or end all be all or anything. Yeah, so that's basically just a lot of saying all that in a lot of different words. Let's see. For this next one, the interpretation category, this is basically saying that unless there's a pre-existing interpretation, those petitions will always be moved forward. And even if there is a pre-existing termination, if a justice believes that we need a new one, this is like old, antiquated, then that can, a lot of democracy going on here. More procedural stuff about notification of the accused. This is basically just telling us the time frame in which everything happens. There's going to be, as I scroll through this, there's a lot of stuff just saying timelines about like, there'll be a lot of numbers in parentheses telling you the number of days minimum we have to wait for things to happen. And so this is just for structure, for not only for the justices to guide ourselves, but also for anyone who is thinking about taking part in this procedure, or anyone just curious about it. It's very forward and open to everyone. Let's see. Next is the ability to dismiss charges. If one of those three qualifications that I highlighted earlier is no longer met or something like that, there's ability to kind of dismiss the case. This is more procedural stuff about scheduling the hearing. Just again, adequate time. That's the theme here. Disqualification of members. I'll touch on this towards the end of the document, but basically, justices are responsible for knowing when they have a conflict of interest and like announcing their conflict of interest and recusing themselves, and thereby disqualifying themselves. And we also give parties in the hearing the right to challenge up to one justice for either personal bias or conflict of interest that they know about that perhaps the justice isn't being forthcoming about. And that decision will ultimately be made by the Chief Justice and the judicial advisor, as far as if that's like a fair conflict of interest that they're talking about or a relevant conflict of interest. And really the only reason that this wouldn't be allowed to happen, the disqualification wouldn't be allowed to happen, is if that brings us below quorum. This next section is really just more procedural stuff about witnesses and evidence and timeliness of exchange. The important point that's relevant to everyone here is that the judiciary has the right to call any member of ASG as a witness. So yeah, trying to think. There's nothing quite more relevant here, just more procedural stuff. I've touched on how all cases are open until we find out if there's a verbal violation relevant. So this is what that's all saying. This is general university policy on recording hearings and stuff like that, disciplinary procedures, because all of our meetings have to be recorded, all of our hearings have to be recorded. More procedural stuff about exchanging evidence. A failure of either party to appear. So this is it's a significant difference between the interpretation type hearings and the actual discipline type hearings. In interpretation hearings, if one or both parties don't show up, the hearing will kind of play out as it is, and we will still just interpret with the information given to us beforehand. But in the case of a disciplinary hearing, if the accuser doesn't show up, then the hearing is just, the case is just dismissed because we can't ask further questions, and that's really important for our job. But if the accused doesn't show up, then we'll still proceed. Yeah. These next two are just a general agenda, basically saying the chair calls the meeting to order. The case is presented, there's time for questions, and there's deliberation. It takes a max of about 2 hours, but a justice has the right to extend the time in the way that you all have the right to extend the time on your agenda. For decision making, again, as I said, it's about a preponderance of evidence, about what's most likely, not about what's with a shadow of a doubt. And this is actually a really important point that at least I found in writing this, helped conceptualize it, so maybe it'll help you understand, is that when you're in a case or when you're deliberating something in terms of finding someone responsible, the presumed motion is a positive one in that you're trying to find them, like the motion is like, I move to find someone responsible, person X responsible. And so if you fall below the threshold required, so simple or 2/3, that means that you ultimately find that person not responsible. Not like if it's a tie, you're like, oh, we're at a stalemate, we can't do anything. That person is just found not responsible. That makes sense. But in cases with the interpretation, like someone will need to fall on one side or the other, so there can't really be a tie. There just has to be a simple majority on a certain interpretation. The next is just about written opinions, saying that they can only be so long and that they have to be published on the ASG website. This next one is about the right to an appeal. This is pretty standard, 3 qualifications for an appeal across, I think, all of student affairs. It's basically if the hearing wasn't fair, if there's new significant information, or if the sanction imposed was excessive. And they would appeal to the AVP of Student Affairs, so that's Dr. Avery. I should talk more about this in that we discussed this appellate procedure a lot in terms of should they come back to the judicial branch. But we said, well, we're the body, we're only 5 people, and we ultimately decided this before, so it would almost feel like unfair to the person appealing to come back to the same people who already made up their mind. It just didn't seem as fair to us, so we said, send it to the AVP. And the AVP has the right to reverse, modify, or sustain our decision. Getting to sanctions. So this is a list of sanctions taken from some document from the Office of Ethical Development and Restorative Practices. Don't remember which one, probably the code. Saying that our sanctions are a warning letter, asking someone to write a formal letter of apology, general restorative practices, specific performance. So it's kind of like things to do that fall outside of the realm of those that I just listed. Restitution, so reimbursement, educational opportunities, ASG probation, and a general loss of privileges. It could be any combination of those things. And we also say that a failure to comply with sanction could result in more severe sanctions. Getting to the end, this is kind of what I mentioned earlier about confidentiality and that everything we do is considered confidential, but especially the FERPA stuff. This one right here, I should point out, this was a big topic of conversation for a number of reasons about the release of confidential information, non-FERPA confidential information, in that I originally thought this would be a very good thing to keep in here, but I and everyone who I asked kind of didn't know what specifically would fall under this category. Like I couldn't give you an example. I can give you an example for everything else I've talked about, but not this one. But in talking to General Counsel, they said that it's best to keep this in here just in case something pops up that we can't quite conceptualize now, but just to keep procedures open for every instance we can run into. So the release of confidential information, what we decided on, the release of such information would ultimately fall on the Chief Justice. However, one could argue that it ultimately falls on UST General Counsel insofar as if General Counsel says like, you should not release that confidential information, then we just can't because we don't want to be sued as an individual student or as an institution. So just for everyone's safety, General Counsel says no to the release of confidential information, then it's a no. Touched on this about impartiality. Every member should be impartial. It's their responsibility. Any instance of proving to not be impartial could be grounds for performance review. And as I touched on earlier about conflicts of interest, everyone should make their conflicts known, at least to the Chief Justice and their advisor, about really just any conflicts of interest that would result in impartiality or bias. And then, very long way of saying that, discretion, this one is just saying like, if there are things that perhaps fall under the judicial branch's realm that are not touched on in this document. So let's say we change our constitution, but don't change this, like we kind of already did last week. It's up to the Chief Justice's discretion to figure out how these rules apply. And then the rest is just amendments and ratification. I know I went through that very fast. So please tell me if you have questions, clarifications, need me to scroll, or motions. There are no stupid questions. This is complicated. This took a very long time to write, so feel free.
Angelo?
I think you did a really awesome job and it looks really great. I was just wondering though, so when you say for evidence, it's like not, it's like probable cause, or how did you phrase that again?
It's like probable, but not without a shadow of a doubt.
So like, how is that like measurable? You know what I mean? Is it just like what everyone's feeling, or like, how would you do that if evidence or like isn't really required?
Dr. Avery?
I was going to have Anaya answer that question.
Okay. Well, I think it's really just, I don't know if there's a specific way to quantify, just not like, there
It's
can be
more
doubt.
likely than not.
Yeah, it's just more likely than not. It's just, there doesn't, you can present us doubt and we can say, okay, but it's likely that you still did this. Does that make sense? Just most likely.
It's a standard that is used at universities in the conduct process. It's, is it more likely than not that this happened?
Yeah.
So I just wanted to give a shout out to Anaya because she has been working on this for a really, really long time, and it has been a lot of hard work. And I appreciate all the time and dedication that she's put into it. So kudos to Anaya.
Shout out to Dr. Avery. She read this like 3-4 times, so thank you.
Angelo?
Oh no, thank you. That's fine. I was just wondering about that policy. But thank you, and it looks really great. That was my only concern.
Any other questions? Or motions? It's 2/3 majority.
Lauren?
I guess just like, were there any like huge changes from last year's bylaws?
Oh, there were no last year's bylaws. This is a ratification. So we
Oh.
wrote this. Like this used
So
to be a
good.
blank Google Doc, and now it's this. So I guess all of it's different from last year's bylaws, and that.
Okay, thanks.
Madeline?
Great job, by the way. Thank you for explaining it. I did have a question, like when would we do a hearing procedure? Is that a dumb question?
That's a great question. So it's basically if there's, let's use the example of there's a disagreement in interpretation of the election bylaws. That's not a good example. In the Senate bylaws, you would, if there's conflict, you would come to us, you would fill out this like form saying, hey, I'd like to file an official petition. And then that's when the hearing happens. It's not necessarily the hearing, it's just a formal discussion to settle an interpretation of something. So yeah, something like that.
Thank you.
Alana?
I move to approve the judicial bylaws.
Second.
There was a motion on the floor having been seconded to approve the judicial branch bylaws. Is there any further discussion? If not, please cast your votes. Fantasy, can you please cast your vote? Thank you. Motion passes. The bylaws have been approved. Yay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Anaya. Okay, lovely. So we can move on to the next line item in new business, which is a discussion of trust feeding friendly campus resolution. So Sabrina, if you want to share your screen, I know you had a presentation.
All right. Hi, everyone. So this is just a little presentation I made because I realized not everybody might not be privy to the topic of trust feeding. So I just wanted to kind of break down what that is. So what is chest feeding? Chest feeding is an inclusive catch-all term. So it includes but not limited to nursing, breastfeeding, pumping, hand expressing, syringe feeding, SNS, and lactating in general. And so people are probably wondering, well, why can't we just say breastfeeding? Because that term is not inclusive of all gender identities. And we want to make sure we're using language that is inclusive for all gender identities. So why this matters to me, and actually my capstone about this is my family. It took my family 4 generations, so basically 80 years for us to be able to lactate past 3 months with our child. And maybe that doesn't sound like a big deal, but a lot of the times why we had to stop is because of systemic reasons. And that essentially denied my family, which is also common for other lactating folks, autonomy over their own body. And so that really struck me. And I realized how it's systemic, then that means it must be occurring in other places. And so I started looking at USD. So let's talk about kind of what the importance of it or what the recommendations are for chest feeding. The WHO recommends, if possible, the first 2 years of life, longer if the person prefers. And for the first 6 months, exclusively chest feeding. And then after that, you add in solid foods. The United States currently has some of the lowest rates of chest feeding compared to other developed nations, statistically, like across the board. And so I also want to take this time to say that formula and supplementation, like with formula, that can occur with chest feeding. I've done that. I've had to do that with my daughter because I need to make sure that she's fed. And so I want to make sure that it's very clear that anyone who decides to use formula intermittently with their milk or just solely use formula, it's their personal choice and that's to be respected, and no one's going to be shamed because you guys support my resolution. It's more just we really want to elevate and amplify another aspect that tends to be marginalized. So it's a systemic issue, like I mentioned before, for many reasons. Socioeconomic status greatly impacts social norms as well, since, as I mentioned before, we have very low chest feeding rates in the States. And so it's not much of a norm here. There's lack of support at work as well as school. USD is an example of that. Policies and practices within the health industry as well. I was in the hospital recently and I had to ask about almost 10 times just to be able to receive a pump. And that was at a hospital that had them. They were just kind of writing me off. So I realized that there isn't one place that is creating this problem. Like I said, it's systemic. And so there's a bunch of different factors involved. And I wanted to touch on that. I don't want anybody to feel like, oh, this is because USD's fault. It's not. It's a whole big, broad issue, but there is stuff we could do. And so I really like this kind of quote from The Who. The success or failure of chest feeding should not be seen solely as a responsibility of lactating folks. I did rephrase it a little. Their ability to support chest feeding is very much shaped by the support and the environment in which they live. I thought that was very telling because chest feeding, we need the support of everybody to be able to succeed. It takes a village. And so you're thinking, well, what can I do? You know, I may not be chest feeding right now. Well, you can support the resolution, which I'll go over in 1 second. And then I also want you to realize that whether you lactate or not, you can be a lactivist. So an activist for lactation. You're totally able to and welcome to do that. We welcome all. So let me go to the actual resolution so we can just glance at it. So, as you guys previously heard during my question to President Harris, this, like the lactating community, is not at all included in the Horizon Project nor envisioning 2024. And, oh, thank you. I noticed that. And I think that that is telling because we're kind of an invisible community on campus. How I realized there was an issue is when I myself was lactating and I wanted to see what resources there were. And I realized that the resources we have just aren't very good. And so, as I stated earlier, we are going to make sure that we are not using the cisnormative way of speaking. I really want us to be inclusive. So for this reason, we're not going to assume pronouns and we're not going to assume parental titles. So we're going to use they, them when talking about who. And caregiver. Don't say this is a mother's space. That is not inclusive. We want to just make sure these spaces are inclusive in all ways possible. And so I don't know if you guys are aware, currently on the website, we have 4 lactation spaces listed. One of them is in the KIPJ, which is inside a gendered restroom. So that means if someone's taking a shower, you cannot use the space. Not only is that disgusting, but that's inaccessible, like for someone who does not feel comfortable using that restroom. So legally, if it's by the law for California, if it was a workplace, that couldn't function as a lactation space because they cannot be in restrooms. But as students, we aren't quite covered by that law. It's a very gray area. And so what's really hard is we don't always know what our rights are. And it's really confusing. I had to do a lot of research and I actually had to meet with a couple different people who research this for a living. And so that's why later on in the resolution, I have a call to action for Title IX to have like explicitly listed that we're covered under Title IX because I didn't know that I was. And I've had teachers tell me that like, because I have to chest feed my daughter during class and I mute my camera, like I'm not really participating. I'm not an active student or I'm not a good fit for the classroom environment. And so we are discriminated against and we don't always know how to handle that because if you're the only one, you don't want to speak up. And so we really want to just make sure we're supporting all of our community members. I wanted to also touch on the mental health aspects. There is a connection between chest feeding difficulties and postpartum depression. I myself have experienced postpartum depression due to my chest feeding difficulties. It was a very systemic thing. I'm lower income. I didn't have proper access to resources. It was during a pandemic. You know, there was a lot going on and it was really hard. So I think that we need to take in holistically when viewing these students and realize that not only is this something they are maybe physically doing or a physical space they need, but we need to also realize the mental aspect too, the mental health aspect, that if they don't have these spaces, how that can weigh on them and how that can affect them. And so I also really wanted to touch on, because I think when I've been having these conversations, people can be under the impression that, well, you only need to chest feed a child for maybe 1 year or maybe less than that. And that's not how it works. It's however long that person decides to do it for. And so if they decide to do longer than a year, if they decided to do the WHO's recommended 2 years or even longer, good for them, and we should support them. And it shouldn't be something where they feel uncomfortable sharing and uncomfortable using these spaces to do such, because I feel like right now there's a bit of that stigma that, well, these are just temporary spaces people only use for a few months. And maybe people only use it for a few months because they feel really awkward having to explain while they want to continue to chest feed their 14-month-old, because for some reason when kids hit 12 months, it's weird to continue to do that. I really want USD to actively label itself as a chest feeding friendly campus. Other campuses across the states, they've labeled themselves breastfeeding friendly. And I think that that really just helps let students know who are looking for that, students with dependents or students who, like me, are very non-traditional. I didn't have a dependent when I started at USD, but I had a dependent during my time there. And so that would have been really nice to like know where these spaces were and know that they existed instead of kind of having to figure it out as I went. I really feel that that labeling and then these active actions would really make a big difference and really speak to USD's mission of fostering a culture of care, inclusivity, and accessibility. I think that's very important to just hold the university accountable, because we'll say big things and we need to do things that align with that. I believe that we should have at least one lactation space per building. I know that someone might think, well, really, you need that many? I mean, we don't know what community members are going to be using these spaces, and typically these spaces are single occupancy. So when you think about the amount of people that we have on campus, I really don't think that's asking too much. Not all of these spaces have to be consistent spaces that are always there. It can be kind of on an as needed basis. And that's why I also, later down, you'll see the call to action I have for faculty to also be involved with this. I had it where I wanted each lactation space to have a door that shuts and locks, a working power outlet, water, a microwave, a sink, a table. The table and chair both need to be at proper heights for pumping and nursing, depending on what the person needs, as well as all the spaces follow the specific measurements that ensure compliance with ADA guidelines. So I just wanted to make sure that those are the bare minimum standards for the most part, aside from the microwave and sink. But those are, to be honest, necessities that you need when you are trying to clean your pump parts. You need to have access to water, and then you need to have access to a microwave in order to sterilize them. If you don't do that, you'll get bacteria and you can get an infection, or the baby could get very sick. So I just wanted to put that in there, because I realized that if we providing these spaces, we need to make sure that they're equipped. And if that isn't in the space, then there should be a space nearby where the person is able to use it. I also said that I wanted these spaces that are available consistently. As I mentioned before, I want them to be on the My San Diego mobile app and our website for greater accessibility. I also want the law school's lactation space added to the website. I'm not sure if you all are aware, but we actually have 5 lactation spaces. The law school refuses to list theirs on the website, which is illegal. And so I really would like theirs to be listed on there, because we sometimes take finals in the law school. So I really think that undergrad students and graduate students alike shouldn't be excluded from that space. We wishing to go to USD. I think that we have equal right to that domain. I also said I thought we should kind of have some type of campus booking system. This was just an idea I had because I do think that we do need drop-in hours. You can't always control when you're going to lactate, but you can have an idea sometimes. So having the ability to not only have drop-in hours should you need it, but also being able to schedule ahead of time, I think would be really functional, because right now it's like you kind of coordinate with Erin from the Women's Commons, who is fabulous, but that's a lot to ask of her. And so I really think that as we expand, we should be smart and be able to create a system that just we can do easily. And I also thought that this could be a federal work study position for someone to manage these systems and make sure that the lactation spaces are clean after each use. And so this is where I had the faculty and staff. And so I just wanted to make sure that faculty and staff realize that their involvement in this is very important. We need campus-wide support, so we do need students as well. But faculty and staff, they have, I think, a big pull in the sense of being able to create spaces within their departments and being able to kind of create these discussions within their departments about what these spaces could look like and what kind of accommodations they could do. This is not exactly our area to do that, so that's why I kind of put it on them. I also think that this type of training about chest feeding and breastfeeding needs to be added to their diversity training, because I don't know if it's covered well enough or if it's covered at all, but based on conversations that I have had with professors, it's been uncomfortable to say the least. So I just think that we need to just update them about students' legal rights, what they have, and workers as well, to lactate, and then encourage faculty to include a statement about lactation spaces and accommodations for lactating in their syllabi, and maybe refer students to Title IX or wherever the proper department they feel is. And so I also included that I felt the university should be able to provide lactating students with an on-call international board certified lactation consultant. So that's like a lactation consultant who's done all the training, and through the Student Health Center, because lactating is a medical thing. If you are having issues, you can have essentially an infection of breast tissue, and that can make you really, really sick. And so we need to be able to have access to lactation consultants. And if we are normally able to seek treatment through the Student Health Center, I don't see why this should be different. I think that they should be able to have someone on call should someone need that. I think that's very important. I also think the counseling center should have therapists who are equipped to support students who are experiencing postpartum depression. Our needs may be different, and what we talk about in session, we may need someone who just has more experience with treating postpartum depression. I also mentioned the creation of at 6 weeks. Currently, our childcare, I believe, is at 2.5 years old with potty training, and it costs an astronomical amount. So at 6 weeks, that's typically when people who've just had a child are cleared off disability to return to work. And so USD doesn't have anything for not only their students, but also their workers, for them to have their child nearby. And that, I think, is an injustice. I think they should be able to have their child nearby, and that way that can promote a better chest feeding relationship, because it's those first couple months where you can really establish your chest feeding relationship. And so I really wanted to focus in on as well as the cost, because childcare should not be seen as a luxury, but rather as a necessity. It really bothers me how much it costs for childcare at USD. I really think that there should be an adoption of vouchers, so that way it's accessible to all members of the community, because it is a necessity. We need to have childcare. And since USD is seeking to become an emerging Hispanic serving institution, they should also look at what current Hispanic serving institutions locally are doing, such as SDSU, Grossmont Community College, and CSU San Marcos, to say the least, which is creating affordable options for students. They're creating affordable options for their faculty, and then they're also creating options for their community members, as well as lowering the age requirements, so much lower than what USD currently has. So, thank you. Lauren?
Lauren.
Sorry.
Would the funding for these things, by the way, this is amazing and great, and thank you for doing this work, because like you said, if somebody thinks they're alone in this, they're not very likely to speak up, so I appreciate that. Would funding for like childcare and or like creating more chest feeding stations, would that come from university funding if it like turned into an initiative possibly, or would it be like Senate initiative fund, or what was like your thinking?
So I was originally kind of like talking about how to create more spaces, and I was told, oh, it's so expensive. But then I met with someone who is the vice provost at their school, who created the whole like lactation spaces on their campus. And they have one of the best in the country. So it was really awesome to talk with them, because essentially they use furniture that the university already has. So I want to know where the furniture that Copley used to have is, because that furniture would be totally fine to use for lactation spaces. We can reuse. I want to reuse as much as we can. For the funding for the childcare, I really think that this is something the university should adopt as part of their Hispanic serving institution. They're going to receive more federal funding with that, as well as like with their envisioning 2024. I think that this is something they can afford to do, to create a voucher system for that.
We've reached our allotted time for this agenda item. If anyone would like to make a motion to extend the time, they could do that now.
I suggest that we have a couple of other things still on the agenda that we need to get through. And since this still needs another sponsoring senator, this resolution, it could be passed next week's Senate as well. I just want to suggest that. Lauren.
I move to table this item until next week's Senate meeting.
Second.
There's a motion on the floor having been seconded to table this resolution until next Senate meeting. Is there any further discussion? If not, please cast your votes. Thank you. Motion passes. Thank you so much, Sabrina. Next item under new business is presentation of a new student organization. Brooke, the floor is yours.
Hi, so we really only have one organization this week. It's the Student Philanthropy Council. And so there are a couple things about their meetings and everything, but basically their mission is just what they have listed is to improve the students' lives of current and future Toreros by trying to raise awareness of how philanthropy improves the USD community, encourage small philanthropic donations given by students to support diversity and inclusion through highlighting funds that support minority communities on campus. They're structured pretty similar to other clubs where they do bi-weekly meetings. They have exec board meetings and then little subcommittees. But basically, their goals of their club are just to make the USD community more aware of different philanthropic events, either through education, donation, or volunteering. And yeah, so that's basically their mission and everything. If anyone has any questions. Or motions.
Lauren.
I move to approve the Student Philanthropy Council as a new organization.
Second.
There's a motion on the floor having been seconded to approve the Student Philanthropy Council organization. Is there any further discussion? If not, please cast your votes. Motion passes. This org has been approved. Moving on to old business. Okay. Moving on to old business is a discussion of standards for virtual learning resolution. AJ?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for sticking around. I know the Senate was long. This is the document that we chatted about last week for the adoption of equitable policies for remote learning. I know we're at the end of the semester, going into in-person learning in the fall. However, there are a couple of areas that this resolution will bring to the table for teachers to consider whenever they're building their syllabuses and outlining the morals and impacts that they're having on their students. For example, adopting trauma-informed teaching pedagogies in their classrooms, just basically meaning that they're going to ensure the students' emotional safety is in the works with their teaching along with the physical safety. There are two new be it resolved clauses that we included. I've highlighted them today. The first being that the faculty employ the recommendation of not requiring students to record during their classroom, basically, so lockdown browser. And then the second thing would be to make sure that the classes are, whenever they are recorded, they are made accessible to students in an equitable asynchronous learning environment. Today, I'm really here to answer any questions that you may have, as well as be open to any motions on the floor.
Ari?
Thanks, AJ, for this resolution. My question is in regards to like, who can we direct students to, especially when, you know, professors have struggled to put asynchronous, to put their lecture recordings on Panapto, I believe, just because there have been cases of students that, and my peers that have told me that professors haven't uploaded them throughout the semester. So they struggle to refer back to it. So just in terms as to who we can contact for that. Thanks.
Yeah, for sure. So as the academics committee, our first recommendation always and forever will be to have the student chat with their professor to see if the conversation can be mitigated in any way. If the professor can support, obviously we've had cases where professors aren't as supportive of students as we'd like. So then that case is taken up with the dean of the school. And if not, there are case-by-case basis on how we're going to strategize to fix this situation. But that would be the first two for sure steps to take. And then there would be a more broader conversation after that. Did that answer your question?
Madeline?
Thank you for putting this together. I know you were explaining the first addition, or not, like the highlighted part.
Yeah.
In that first sentence, is there like a word missing? I don't know if I'm understanding the clarity of that sentence. As that faculty employ the recommendation of not requiring students to use their front facing nor any alternative during exams as well.
Mm-hmm. So are you asking for clarification on the sentence?
Yeah, is it supposed to be to use their front facing camera nor any alternative camera?
Oh, gotcha. We will make a note of that. Front facing. Thank you for bringing that up. We just put this together, or the last couple of bits today. And thanks for catching that, Madeline.
Does anyone have any other questions, comments, concerns regarding this motion or regarding this resolution? If not, are there any motions? Madeline?
I move to approve this resolution.
Second.
There's a motion on the floor having been seconded to approve the standards of virtual learning resolution. Is there any further discussion? If not, please cast your votes. Elena, I'm still just waiting on you. Thank you. Motion passes. The resolution has been approved. Okay, moving on to reports from Speaker of Senate. I'm gonna try to make this quick because we have a lot more updates to go through. But so Senate next week will not be on Thursday because the Board of Trustees meeting is then. So Senate will be held on Tuesday, May 4th next week. And that's the last Senate meeting of the semester. And the new senators will be sworn in then. And then also ASG Banquet is happening this Saturday at 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I've been attending the Vice Provost of Diversity, Inclusion, and Equity Open Student Forums. I've seen a couple other senators there asking some really great questions. So we're hoping that the Vice Provost is going to be appointed soon. And the next one is taking place tomorrow. So if you're interested in attending that one, I can give you that information. Just send me a message or an email. And then I will be talking about this more, but the Constitution amendments are up and voting will take place on your My San Diego portal from Thursday, May 7th to Monday, May 10th. Moving on to reports from committee chairs and coordinators. AJ?
Hi again. No new updates for Senate. However, one initiative we are working on is a GPA requirement for senators whenever they're applying to, or for any position in ASG, possibly adopting a case-by-case basis depending on the data that we gather. We've been communicating with Dr. Avery to see if we can get some numbers from the Office of Institutional Research. If y'all have any concerns or questions regarding the GPA requirement for ASG, potentially even moving this initiative onto the next semester so we can have a good package set up for our next officers, that would be great.
Hey everyone, no new updates this week.
Hi everyone. So we had our first student org mentorship program event yesterday. That went really well, and we're hopeful that those returning orgs and new orgs can keep that relationship throughout the summer and help each other next semester.
Hello everyone. We have no new updates from student life. Thank you.
Hi guys, I also have no new updates at this time.
Hey y'all, so as many of you are aware, the university announced that they're requiring vaccines for fall 2021 students. Please refer to the email sent out last Monday from the president for more helpful details regarding this update. And then San Diego County now has a vaccination site on USD's campus. It's located in the west parking lot. It's open from Tuesday through Saturday from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. And you can schedule an appointment using, I'll drop a link in the chat, and you can also follow at BWillUSC for helpful information regarding the vaccine requirement and fun giveaways. And Take Care of You Week is happening next week. So I'm gonna also drop a flyer in the chat for information on programs and resources available.
Hi everybody, happy Thursday. I just had a meeting with the people that we've been working on the Sustainable Goods database with, and I would like to make a note that we are gonna make an edit to add like dollar signs onto it, kind of in accordance with the Yelp, so students can see the price ranges, and then it also kind of serves as like a good teaching moment that even though you're paying maybe a little bit more, is also something that's more sustainable. And you're not paying for like negative externalities. And then secondly, we're almost ready to publish it. I'm thinking next week after we make final edits, we'll publish that, and it'll be available for students to refer to. And then second thing, as always, you might as well go check out the sustainability module on Blackboard. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Okay, so no new updates, but as always, the DLDRC got Natural Reader approved. So if you need a subscription, just email disabilityservices@sandiego.edu or email me, and we can get you that. It lasts not only for the semester, but the summer and the fall. And so if you just want to like get on that now, that'd kind of be like best interest, I guess. So then that way next fall or even during the summer, you can have it. You do not have to be registered with the DLDRC, so anyone can have it, like I said. Sorry, a little redundant, but I might as well, you know, just like keep repeating it instead of not. So reach out to me. I'm excited to kind of like have updates for next week, just because, as you know, we amended, I guess, like the ID&E committee to involve accessibility. And so that means this committee will no longer be a thing, but we are coming up with new ways to still be involved in collaborating with other folks for next year. So thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Moving on to reports from ASG exec board members. Isaiah can't make it today, but he just wanted to let y'all know about the banquet, which is this Saturday. Come through, it'll be fun. And if you are a member of the public, please put your email in the chat so he could get that credit to you.
Madam Speaker, point of privilege.
Take him all. Thanks, AJ. Joey.
Thank you, Maya. So here are my updates. Everyone, we've almost made it through. We only got one more Senate meeting. I'll be quick. So transition-wise, I have started meeting with our new ASG president, just to discuss and get her ready for the upcoming year. So I'm really excited about that. Y'all are in really good hands. And then with regards for the VPSA search, we had 2 rounds of interviews, or 2 separate days of interviews. I know President Harris said that I know who the candidates are and how diverse the field is. However, since that information has not officially been released to the public, I cannot say anything about them. Notice how he said 2 or 3 candidates will be invited to campus. 2 or 3, that's because we don't know officially who has accepted the invite. So that is why I cannot share any information with you, as well as a bunch of other legal confidentiality things. So there's that. Shower cards, almost done. Literally have gonna be submitting the draft to the printing center. They're actually not going to be shower cards. They're going to be kind of like door handle things that you put on the shower. Justice will probably work on the final stages of that during her administration. So there's that. SACBOT next Thursday. And then lastly, over the weekend, it was brought to our attention that a transgender youth was made unavailable to speak at the SDS X, a drag super. It's called Supreme Drag Superstar X. And Maya, myself, Anaya, and Isaiah met with President Harris and VP Vasquez just to get clarification on why the youth could no longer speak. Apparently, it was because of something in the conduct that required training. There was just a miscommunication on how it was conveyed. So based off of that, we have released a statement. I encourage you all to look at that statement, pushing university to provide more clarification on their code of conduct and their policies regarding speakers, because if there's any ambiguity with the stuff, it should be got rid of immediately. And I can imagine, well, I will speak on behalf of all except when we say we do not want this to happen again. So yeah, those are the updates with regards to that. Thank you.
Thanks, Joey. Hello, everyone. So real quick, I have an update from University Senate as to test optional admissions. So real quick, what that means, for those of you that may not know, the SAT and other standardized tests like it they're discriminatory, and it's tough on poor communities or communities that maybe don't have access to SAT prep areas. And so in lieu of that, universities nationwide have been transitioning to either being test optional or test blind, or test free is what it's called. When the pandemic hit, the University of San Diego shifted to becoming test optional for the 2021 admission class. And they just announced that for the 2022 admission class, they will also be test optional in terms of recruitment. What they will be doing is that new placement exams have been in place to be taken over the summer to replace those standardized tests. So for math placement and English placement, USD has these new exams, which are costly, but in terms of shifting away from standardized testing, this is what the university wanted to move towards. The entire UC system is test-free. And I think Lauren has a hand raised.
Lauren?
Are those placement exams, you said they're costly, are they going to have to be paid for by students, or is that something the university has taken on?
It is something the university has taken on. I apologize for my vagueness of language. It is costly for the university, but they really wanted to shift away from the standardized testing because, as I said, it's been going around and the UC system is already test-free. So that's something that's been going on, and we hope as we go into envisioning 2024 and how the school wants to be a Hispanic serving institution, this will be one of those implementations. Shifting over to the trends among the class that we just accepted, the first years, as usual, the majority is from California. However, there was, as usual, a lot of admissions from the core states within the Western region of the US. As far as race and ethnicity trends, for the next class, for the class of 2020 or the 2022 incoming first year class, for the first time in the history of ever with USD, more non-white students were admitted than white students. Does this mean that USD will start becoming more diverse? We don't know, but it is a step in the right direction because while they're admitted, that doesn't mean that they will accept it and go to the school. But that's just a data point that they wanted to point out. And then lastly, for me, huge thank you to the members of ASG who could make it last night, members from the academics committee, Maya, and several other senators that maybe it's not on the top of my head, took a lot of time out of their Wednesday evening to meet with myself and the University Senate Executive Committee just to hash out the rationale on the student side for pass-fail and also the obstacles that are in place with the faculty side. To be honest, there was a lot of reasonings that show why there is not a lot of faculty support, including reasonings brought up about graduate school needs and the timing of it and how it's late in the semester and how there's sort of been a redirection of ownership. They've been telling us as students to go to the faculty, and then the faculty says go to the provost and then the deans, and then it's been going back and forth and back and forth. After the professors left, myself and several other students sort of gathered together and created sort of notes and action items for us to take, which will happen in the next couple of days. Luckily though, the last and next University Senate is going to be next Thursday. And the main sentiment that was expressed is a lot like what Dr. Harris shared earlier. You know, there are those that want pass-fail. However, if the majority does not pass, then it won't be able to go through. So we're going to work on different alternatives and ways to try to make it happen. But that's all from me.
Alrighty. Hi, everyone. Happy Thursday. So first off, I wanted to say thank you to everyone who participated in our Earth Day virtual challenge. Our winners have already been contacted, so if you're one of them, congratulations. As I mentioned last week, our final event of the year to celebrate APITA Heritage Month is next Thursday, May 6th at 7 p.m. Pacific PDT. And we are bringing really famous TikTok cook Tiffy Cooks, who made 3 special recipes for USD students. So we would be happy if you could join. I also, of course, it's our last event, and I just realized we had QR codes for every registration, and I could have just added them to the screen, but here's this one. So if you would like to register, you can use your phone to scan the QR code and sign up. We will help cover the cost of the ingredients. I can't guarantee that it will cover all of them because she did offer 3 recipes, but it should help cover a huge chunk of it. So yeah, and that'll be all. Very sad for this to be the last event. So I really hope that you all could join us and have a fun couple hours with Tiffy.
Hey everyone, my updates are very short because you heard me talk a lot today, but I only have the Constitution, which Maya mentioned earlier. The amendments will happen from May 7th to May 10th. I believe May 7th is a Friday to that Monday. So yeah, in the meantime, just spread the link to the Constitution amendments, which I'll drop in this chat in a second. And then just a random update about the new judicial branch. They were selected last Friday, and the new Chief Justice will be selected tonight. So that's all.
Hello, everyone. The Finance Committee met last week to allocate for the fall 21, and everything is good to go. I'll be sending those budgets and everything for you to take a look and be prepared for the coming Tuesday to vote on those decisions. And of course, if you have any questions before the meeting, please reach out so we can have a smooth and easy meeting, because we know we have a packed agenda for next week. So thank you.
Hey everyone, happy Thursday. So not too many updates. This is just the last friendly reminder that if you have any requests at all from marketing, we'd be happy to take it and support you. Our last committee meeting is next Thursday, usually during the time that Senate meets. So please, if you want a request, keep that timeline in your mind. And website edits right now are sent in officially, so the website should be updated with just relevant information. And again, a lot of content has been going out through our Instagram and Bluebus, so just keep your eye out for it. And if you can, please repost and share with your networks. Thank you.
Hello again, everyone. Oh, sorry, I was just going to say Isaiah's points. Isaiah reached out to me, and really just the ASG banquet is this Saturday, like I mentioned earlier, and members of the public, if you could please insert your email in the chat, I'll try to record it, and he asked me to send him a list, but that's all.
Thanks, everyone. Moving on to final business and hearing of the public. At this time, any senator may take from the table any motion previously laid on the table in the meeting the week before, or present urgent business. Any member of the public may voice any concerns to the assembly on non-agenda items. I just want to quickly emphasize Rafa's point about looking over the budget. There's a lot of information there, and it's very important that everyone knows what they're voting on before we actually get to Senate on Tuesday. So please make sure that you look at that. Rafa?
Thank you, Maya. And I will provide a summary of our decisions and how we decided, or the Finance Committee decided to make decisions. So it is easy for you to go through every single budget. Thank you.
Madam Speaker, point of personal privilege.
Take him well. Justice.
Hi everyone again. I just wanted to see if we could take an opportunity to take a quick picture since we all have our ASG merch on. Madam Speaker, is that all right?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, cool, thank you. So just for 2 minutes, if everyone could turn on their cameras, that'd be great. And if you are not a member of ASG, I ask if you could just keep your camera off. Let me lower my hand. All right, I'll give everyone like a couple seconds to get adjusted. So we're gonna have to take 2 pictures just because we have a lot of people here. Okay, let's see. Alrighty, so it seems like everyone's all good to go. Maybe Rafa's. Okay, cool. Alrighty, everyone good? Thumbs up if you are good to go for a picture. Cool. Alrighty, so let me. Okay, so I'm gonna count to 3. So smile. 3, 2, 1, cheese. Cool. All right, 1's good. Let's do 1 more. So I'm waiting for this little thing to go. Okay. Alrighty, again, 1 last time. 3, 2, 1, cheese. Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone.
Madam Speaker, point of privilege.
Taken well. Lupe?
Sorry, one thing I forgot to mention in my update, next Wednesday is the last day to submit something if you want on the Blue Buzz. So May 10th will be the last day for the last Blue Buzz that will go out this year. So please, if you want anything to be done for the end of the semester, please make sure I get it by next Wednesday. And I'll be sure to include in my updates on Tuesday, but just wanted to give more advance notification.
Thank you, Lupe. Ceci?
Madam Speaker, point of privilege, please.
Taken well. Angelo?
For point of privilege.
Taken well. Sabrina?
If there's no further discussion, I move to adjourn today's meeting.
Second.
There's a motion on the floor having been seconded to adjourn today's meeting. Is there any further discussion? If not, please cast your votes. Fantasy, can you please cast your vote? Fantasy, you there? Okay, that's fine. Motion passes. Thanks, everyone.